Mark 11, chapter 11, verse 27. And here we go. Then they came to Jerusalem, and as he, starting with the disciples, and as he was walking in the temple, the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders, they came to him. And they said to him, "By what authority, Jesus, are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority to do these things?" But Jesus answered and said to them, "I also will ask you one question. Then answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or was it from men? Answer me." And they reasoned among themselves, saying, If we say from heaven, then he will say, "Why then did you not believe him?" But if we say from men, then they feared all the people around that counted John to have been a prophet indeed. So they answered and said to Jesus, "We don't know." And Jesus answered and said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things." The first time I read this passage, I kind of just skimmed right it, and I'm like, I don't really know if we need to go there. We'll just skip this part and go right into Mark chapter 12. I don't really know that there's some deep significance here. The Pharisees and the religious leaders of the day, they're challenging Jesus again because that's all they do. Like seriously, when I read the New Testament and I read the Gospels and I see how much interaction that Jesus has with these Pharisees and these chief priests and the scribes, because they're all trying to attack him, I often wonder what else did they do? What else did they do besides just try and get under Jesus' skin and try and challenge his authority? And so I'm thinking, they're just trying to challenge his authority. Jesus is putting them in his place again and carry on. It wasn't until I came across this story a while back that as I read this passage, that story came back to mind. And I want to read you that story in just a few moments because I believe that this story kind of helps bring everything into perspective. Because when I look at the Pharisees and the religious leaders of the day, they were absolutely relentless. Think about this, in the face of a revival, that of which no man had ever seen or likely will ever see again until the second coming. But imagine putting yourself in that position, in that place, in that time, what they were witnessing. The absolute, undeniable truth that they would have experienced and would have been introduced to and would have witnessed firsthand, they still challenged him. They still would not concede to Jesus. It reminds me, again, of this story, and I'd like to share it with you. So I'll read this to you. A lion was caught up with a lion who was caught up with being the master of the jungle decided to make sure that all of the other animals knew that he was the king of the jungle. He was so confident that he bypassed all the smaller little animals and he went straight to the bear. "Who is the king of the jungle?" the lion demanded. The bear replied, Why, you are, of course." The lion gave a mighty roar of approval. And next he went to the tiger. And the tiger, "Who is the king of the jungle?" he roared. The tiger quickly responded, "Everyone knows that you are, O mighty lion." The lion swelled with pride. Next on the list was the elephant. The lion faced the elephant and leveled his question. "Who is the king of the jungle?" he challenged. The elephant grabbed the lion with his trunk, whirled him in the air 5 or 6 times, and slammed him against a tree. Then he pounded him on the ground several times for good measure, sat on him once, dipped him in the lake over and over and over again, and then finally dumped him out on the shore. The lion, battered, bruised, dripping wet, because we all know cats hate water, looked at him as he struggled to his feet, and he peered at him through his one good eye. And he said, "Look, just because you don't know the answer to the question is no reason to get mad about it." It's written by an author, Max Anders, and he authored the book 30 Days to Understanding the Bible, and it's a great story. And it's a great story because as we read this story, we begin to see parallels emerging from the story that we just read of the Pharisees and how they reacted to Jesus. The lion, you see, the lion in this story, he had made up his mind. And he had his opinion. Nothing was going to change his opinion. Now, because of that, when presented with evidence to the contrary, the only way he could process it was, obviously, the elephant doesn't know the answer, and he just got upset about it. You see, just like the lion in this story, we too, we can become so convinced that our opinions and our positions are in fact right. And that when confronted with extreme evidence to the contrary, we don't even bat an eye. It's as if we are determined not to let the truth get in the way of our opinion. And we hold our ground. I mean, for me, it wasn't a week into marriage when I learned this concept. How many are in the same boat, right? I mean, the first week into marriage, Jordan and I, we have the best marriage, as you know. And we are absolutely qualified to teach everybody about marriage. But the reality was, in our beginning years of marriage, man, we butted heads on a lot of different things because she's so stubborn. And so I learned at a very young age, in my marriage, of course, yes, dear, thank you, dear. But in behind my mind, the wheels were turning. Those wheels were turning. I mean, and it's not even big stuff. How many of you that are married know that in a marriage relationship, it's not always the big things that that cause rifts. It's not always the big things that cause the friction. It's other things. It's little things. It's things like every single time I ask my beautiful, darling wife a question, sometimes, most times, all times, it takes me 3 or 4 tries to get an answer out of her. I'm like, honey, dear, what do you want to do this weekend? And I wait, and I wait, and I wait. Honey, dear, what would you like to do this weekend? And I wait, and I wait, and I wait. And by the third time, I'm a little kind of on edge. Yo, what do you want to do this weekend? And finally, by the fourth time, it's like, honestly, what are we doing on Saturday? And then she's like, why are you talking to me like that? Why are you going to get mad at me? Why? I'm like, because I asked you this question like 4 times. 4 times. And your face was in the book. You were just in the book, and you weren't even acknowledging me. You were just reading, and you just weren't listening to me. And she's like, I answered you the first time. She's like, you want to talk about not listening? I answered you the first time. I answered you the second time. I've already answered your question. Why do you not listen? So this is a brief glimpse into the lovely life of Pastor Josh and Jordan. And it is so sweet, and it is so amazing. But the reality is that we fight about this all the time. Isn't that right? It's right? Because I am so stubborn, and she's kind of bent that way a little bit. But the challenge with that is then all of a sudden our kids start getting in on the mix. Daddy asked you that like 3 times. Mom, why aren't you listening to him? Honey, this is none of your business. Why are you getting involved in this? Mind your own business. And I remember earlier on in our marriage that this became such a huge point of contention for us simply because I firmly believed that I was right. Like this was, I asked you 4 times. My ears, they work. And I know I would have heard an answer come out of your mouth. You might have been thinking you had an answer, but there was no answer coming out of your mouth. There were no words being formed. You did not say anything. And I would be so firm on that. And equally as firm, she would be, I answered you.
I know I answered you because the thought, and I know exactly the words that I said to you. I've already answered this question. Why are we even having this discussion? And we would be equally on, I say, the left and the right. And we'd be like planted there firmly, not willing to budge. Kids getting involved, bickering back and forth. And before you know it, World War III. And I'm telling you, it's little stuff like that. And at a micro level, family, individuals, this stuff is big. But when you take this position, and when you look at opinions, and you look at formulating answers in the face of truth or non-truth, if you look at that at a macro level, I mean, you've got stuff. You've got the makings of something that will split a country right down the middle. And it's no secret that as you and I have been watching what's been happening in the States over the past few weeks, months, that this has brought significant division to many, many Christians. Just park yourself on Facebook for like 5 minutes, and you'll see Christians on one side. Valid, it seems kind of angry, but it seems kind of right. They all have their opinions. They all have their thoughts, and they formulate that. And then you've got the other side, and they've all got their opinions, and they've formulated their thoughts, and they're... And at the end of the day, you've got Christians that are standing on either side of this political debate. And what we've created, I think Satan loves this. We've created division in the Christian church when this was never even about the church. And that's kind of the problem I have. Is you see, Christians, we need to have a bigger world perspective. It's not about this world, Christians. It's about the next world. And if we have that kind of a perspective, then we're never going to see eye to eye on everything politically. But how then do we respond? How then, in the face of differing opinions, can we work together for the greater good, which is seeing people come to know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior? Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. Pastor Steve, wherever you're at, I love what you said. There you go. I love what you said. You preached half my message already, so I'm already there. I'm ready to close this sucker. But I love what you said up there, because this idea, you brought in excellent scripture, and this idea of not living in fear, whether it's at a micro level or at a macro level. For many of us, just like the Pharisees here, we have made up our minds. We are not willing to be wrong. And I want to, at a micro level, in your relationships as a family, as a husband, wife, and at a macro level, if we are not willing to be wrong, then we are falling prey to one simple word, P-R-I-D-E, pride. And we know pride is a significant word, and it's a significant term because pride is essentially the root. If you go all the way back to Genesis, that's the root of the original sin. So look at, the enemy. If you can, looking at, Christians, back and forth, and pride is setting in because I'm right, and you're wrong. And I'm right, and you're wrong. And when we look at it from that angle, we see that Christians on both sides, Christians all over the place, are struggling with pride. And if we aren't careful, the world is going to see Christians as a bunch of bickering people who say they love Jesus, but they don't even love each other. In a marriage, I want to park on this for 2 seconds. Husbands, if you're not willing to admit you're wrong, if you've never apologized to your wife without condition, I'm not saying, I'm sorry for saying that, but I'm sorry for saying that, but if you hadn't, that ain't an apology. Husbands, gentlemen, if you have never apologized to your wife unconditionally, then you have pride in your life, and you need to deal with that. Wives, the same is true. If you, don't stone me, ladies. Don't stone me, ladies. At least you got my back. I know you got my back. Cut that from the film. Cut that quick. But ladies, if in a relationship, you're always expecting your husband to do the apologizing, that means you have pride in your life. And that needs to be dealt with. I'm going to use a great illustration right now with my wife. We've given you some pretty stretchy ones, but this is a good one. I remember early on in our marriage, we had a big old fight, and I knew that I was right. And she knew that she was right. You see how this all stems? You see how you can't win. You just can't win. We need this course more than you guys. Who's teaching it? We're teaching it, right? and in that fight, I often, just because of it's my nature, I'm often the peacemaker because I just don't like to fight. I don't like that, that's just part of my nature. So I don't like to hold on to things. So I'll let it go a little bit, and I'm like, I just can't deal with this anymore. Okay, I'm sorry. And she'll fine. And then maybe she'll apologize. Not all the time. But there was this one occasion where she came to me, and in my heart of hearts, I knew that she was right, but I was just being stubborn. And I was just holding on to this sucker because I was just like, you know what? I'm tired of saying sorry all the time. I'm just tired of this. And that was my perspective. It wasn't true, but it was my perspective. I've got to safeguard that. And she came to me, and she apologized. And she said, listen, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And I knew that she was right all along. But when she did that, when she came, you want to talk about walls being broken down? That broke it was probably one of the most incredible walls being broken down because I knew that she knew she was right. She didn't think that I knew she was right, but I knew she was right. And in my heart of hearts, I knew that she had come to me and asked forgiveness even though she knew she was wrong, she was in the right. That's huge. You see, if in our relationships as married, husband and wife, if we were just to look at things a little bit differently and take pride outside for just a moment, I think we see a whole lot more grace and growth in our relationships because pride blinds. Pride blinds from the truth. And I mean, we can fight about things, and you can present the truth right there. And sometimes I'm just so stuck on my mountaintop that I'm not willing to move because I can't be wrong about this. How can I be wrong? I've done it this way for my whole life. I've done boom, 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 boom my whole life. And then you find ourselves, we start worshiping the tradition over our truth. And that happens in so many Christian circles, and it happens within government circles, politics circles. It happens all over the place. But at the end of the day, when we let pride get a hold of our hearts, pride blinds us from the truth. Matthew 7 verses 1-5 says this, "Judge not that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me remove the speck from your eye,' and look, a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite! First, remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly enough to remove the speck from your brother's eye." We've learned this as kids. The simple plank, eye, speck, eye. You can't go digging the speck out of your neighbor's eye when you've got this giant log sticking out of your eye. Makes for a great illustration, great visual imagery here. But the reality is you cannot do that. You see, the Pharisees, they had planks in both eyes. They were just walking around, stumbling around, knocking into things, and they couldn't see the truth if it was right in front of them, and it was. But they didn't want to see the truth. Truth, seeing the truth, knowing the truth will set you free. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. But in order to know the truth, in order to see the truth, it does not start with your eyes, it starts with the heart. There has to be a desire in your heart for truth. Not a desire in your heart to be right. If that desire is in your heart just to be right, to prove your point, then I'm going to, hedge my best to say that you're probably going to want to mark that on your calendar. March 5th, Sunday night, childcare provided. Legal advice also given. But the reality is it has to start in the heart. That desire, that admonition that says, I need to know the truth. See, as Christians, doesn't matter what debate we get sucked into. If it's not this one in the States, it's going to be another one. A few, maybe just earlier on in the year, maybe last year, I don't remember when it was the whole Christians getting up in arms over refugees coming into Canada for a safe place. Well, now it's Americans getting up in arms for, almost the same reason, but the opposite, not allowing the refugees in, when a few months ago, Canadians were saying, no, don't let them in, don't let them in. Now, those same Canadians looking in the States are saying, how dare you close your borders? And they're like, but you just said back, weren't you walking that, weren't you, doing that? And it just goes back and forth. It's like you just can't win. So where do we find ourselves as Christians? There's this idea, this great, we want to protect our country, absolutely. But beyond that, we're not called to protect our country. Do you know that? That's where the cops are. If you let yourself be ruled by fear, man, you just stay home. Build a bunker in your basement. That's a great idea. Like 5 feet cement walls. Al Wolin can build that for you. He charges big bucks. But I tell you, man, worth every single penny, buddy. And he'll do it for you. If you want to live in fear, that's the way to live in fear, my friends. But if we want to live as Christ wants us to live, we need to look first, not out there. Before you look out there, before you see what's going on out there, start looking here. How big is that plank in your eye? Because I see some big old planks in here. Like I got a couple here. But we got some big planks in our eyes. That's the first place to look. The second place to look would be, I bring a good one, a good look at John 13, 34 to 35. As Jesus tells his disciples, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. This was a new commandment. This is like you're coming out of the law. You're coming out of the stone, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. You're coming now into the new covenant, which says you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Our actions today, what we post on social media, what we say, I'll get to that one later, but what we say out of our mouths, what we say to our friends, the example that we're given, there's only one litmus test. What do others see of you? Are they seeing you as one who loves Jesus, as one who loves other people? Or are they seeing you as one who loves Jesus as a like, what are they seeing? What example of Jesus' love are you exhibiting to those people around you? Not convinced? Jesus' love is an unconditional love. Don't ever forget that. It's not based on anything. It's not based on merit. It's not based on what you did and what you did over there. It's unconditional. He went to the cross for me and my planks in my eyes. He did the same for you. His love was an unconditional love. Loving people that way is really risky. Because Jesus says again in Matthew 5, 43 to 48, you've heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. That's the old law. But I say to you, your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven, for he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. He's in control. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do so? Therefore you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect. You shall love your enemies, bless those who curse you, and do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. In all of this, here's what I don't see God telling his disciples to do. And you need to know, each one of his disciples died for their faith. I've said this before. Each one of them died as a martyr. Love was greater. Their love was greater than any love that I see us as a generation exhibiting. But Jesus doesn't tell his disciples, I need you to confront this over here and confront that and start fighting over this, and you over here start fighting over this, and you over there start fighting over this, and you guys just start. He doesn't say that. He says the heart of everything that he does is bathed and based and birthed in love. It has to be. But then here's what's interesting, because someone could say to me, well, Jesus, he went to the temple. And he flipped over the tables, and he made a statement to the Pharisees. Well, guys, the Pharisees, they weren't looking for the truth. They're just trying to trip him up. And even now they're trying to trip him up. And a lot of that's going on in the world right now. And look at Jesus' response to the Pharisees as they're tripping him up. This is so incredible. At the end of the interaction with the Pharisees, Jesus responds to them with a riddle that they could not answer. They ended up saying, if you won't answer my question, then I'm not going to answer yours. In essence, he's saying to these Pharisees, I know what you're trying to do. I know that you're trying to entrap me. I know that you're trying to put me over here I know what you're trying to do, but I'm not going to play your little game. I'm not going to stoop down on that level and play your little game. You're not looking for the truth. So why do I'm not even bothering with you, because your heart is dead set against the truth. Why would I waste my energy trying to present you to the truth? If your heart's not there, it's wasted breath. Jesus challenged his disciples many times to watch and pray. Watch and pray. Watch and pray. And I gotta be honest with you, I've taken some time over these past few weeks to really watch and pray. When all this stuff started going down, my initial response is, I gotta respond. Holy Spirit's like, no, you don't need to respond. Facebook, social media, is not a good avenue for you to respond, Josh. You need to watch and pray. That's what I'm calling you to do. And I firmly believe that that's what he's asking us as Christians to do. Watch and pray. Because that's what he did with his disciples. He challenged his disciples, watch and pray. And in the midst of watching, you pray, because that's what a heart of love does. A heart of love goes further than that reactionary frustration and anger and righteous indignation, and it goes deep to a place that only God can provide. Love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. When we love in this way, it's the same way that Jesus loved. It's a sacrificial love. You're giving up a lot to love this way. And it's not easy to love this way, because some people will call that inaction. But it's not inaction, my friends. Because when we take that plank out of our eyes and we start looking inwardly, oh God, then it becomes less about the macro and more about the micro. God, what can I do to bless those around me? Those that are needy, those that need you, those that are hurt, those that are longing, those that, it becomes less about that, this glorified, whatever it is, gong show. And it becomes more about this micro level, me, Jesus, what are you asking me to do? What are you asking me to do? I'm willing to bet that if we take the planks out of our eyes and we start asking that question, God, what do you want me to do? And how can, God, can you put a love in my heart for my enemies? If we start praying that prayer, then our response will change. It has to. Because our response from our heart connected with God's heart will always be in line with his. And what is his response? You shall love your enemies. You shall bless those who curse you. You shall do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. Folks, I think this is a test. I think this is a test for things that are, down the road. I look at the disciples, and they had to learn this. And when Jesus left and went to heaven to be with his Father, the apostles, the disciples, they all had to put into practice this love for one another. And you look at their stories, and you look at how each one of them loved sacrificially, and even in the midst of that sacrificial love, how the Spirit of God used them. He will use you. I'm telling you, straight up, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He will use you if your heart is humble. And if your desire is to love people as he has called us to love them. I leave you with this. Love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. And pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. It will be one of the hardest prayers you ever have to pray. But I pray you pray it. I'm praying it. Trust me, I don't want to pray it, but I'm praying it. And I'm asking God to restore my heart, to get a hold of my heart. Because these are challenging days we live in. Really challenging days. But we can do this because greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world.